So I don't know how many of you are stargazers, but when my family and we like to go to Arizona. We have family that lives in Arizona. When we go out there, there's particularly parts of the desert where there's very little light pollution, and the skies are always abundantly clear, at least in the summer. And you can see stars like no other place, it seems like. And we love going outside at night and looking at the stars as they shine. My wife has an app on her phone. She can point her app up towards the sky, and she can see where satellites are. She can see what stars are what. And she can see where the Big Dipper, Little Dipper, all those things are. She can see the planets. My wife loves looking at those things, and I do too. Here's what I want you to know when you go out tonight, and I hope you do. I hope you get a moment where you get a chance tonight or sometime in the next couple of days to walk outside and look heavenward. Because what I want you to know is the light that you see when you see stars at night, you're not seeing the present, you're actually seeing the past. The light from the nearest star in our solar system, the Proxima Centauri, actually takes 4.2 years to get to Earth. So the light that you see when you walk out, the earliest, the newest, the freshest light that you're seeing when you walk out tonight and look up at a star is 4.2 years old. The Andromeda Galaxy, 2.5 million years. Some of the stars visible to the naked eye on a clear night, they don't even exist anymore. Some of the things that you see, those stars are gone from maybe centuries back. But the light that they launched, it was still moving toward me and you, and that's why at night when we look up, we see those stars, and even from the stars that don't even exist anymore. Astronomers call this look-back time. When you look at a star, you're not seeing what it is. You're seeing what it was. You're looking back into a moment that happened, honestly, for a lot of those stars, you're looking back at a moment that happened before you even existed. Before you ever stood on this earth, before you were born, before you ever had an opportunity to know what a star is, those stars, the light that you're seeing, some of those lights that you're seeing in the sky at night were actually, they pre-existed you. Now, I want to borrow this idea this morning because I think it's the most accurate description of what we are celebrating today. We're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. We are celebrating an empty tomb. We are celebrating the fact that when God wrote the check on the cross on Friday, it cleared the bank on Sunday, meaning the funds were sufficient to pay the sin debt of all humanity. That's what that thing means. And that's why the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the most important event in human history. What we experience today and what we're experiencing and what we're worshiping and celebrating is not love present. It's actually love past. It was launched 2,000 years ago. And today we get to stand in the presence of that light that shines and shined forward throughout history to reach me and you. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to frame the text of Luke 15. I want to frame the whole message. I mean, astronomers call it look back time. We're going to call this look back love. That there was a moment in history before you ever existed, before you ever had a moment to accept or deny, before you ever had a moment to sit in a church and hear a message or read the Bible, to know anything about who Jesus was, that God's love was shining in your direction way before you ever knew that you were going to need it. Here's the thing. When you trace the love of God backwards, when you follow the line from today back to the tomb, you never arrive at a moment where it started because of you. Like we know at some point the gospel is presented. We hear about what God did on our behalf, that he crucified his only son, that whoever would believe in him would not perish but have everlasting life. We know that part. But the reality is that when we follow it all the way back, it never started because of you. You never find the place where God looked at your situation and decided that today you were finally worth pursuing. You finally got your act together. You started behaving right. And so today, like that never happened. There was never that moment that one day God said, okay, finally. That God's love has always been aimed from eternity past to now, has always been aimed at you. And I'm glad you're here today. Because God's love is aimed at you. You never locate the moment where grace powered on in response to something that you did. You just find love, and it was already moving. when you arrived at it, when you heard the word for the first time, when you heard about Jesus and what he did for you. It was already moving, already crossing the distance, already bridging the divide that existed between us and God. And it was always moving in our direction before we ever turned to look at it. So Jesus tells this story in Luke 15, and on the surface, it looks like a story that's about a moment. And we're going to unpack that here in a second. It looks like it's a story about a single decision. It looks like a turning point that someone reaches when they have absolutely nowhere left to turn. That's what it looks like in the moment. But because of what look back love does, it doesn't wait for us to make the first move. Like a lot of times when people get saved, like Doug, man, he got baptized today, and we're like, okay, man, whenever it was, however many weeks ago, Doug made a decision that he was going to follow in believers' baptism. That's awesome. And we look at that and we go, well, that was the moment that God's love was poured out on him. No, God's love was poured out on him centuries ago. God had an appointment to meet Doug centuries ago. God knew all the things that Doug and Billy Stevens and every one of you would do. And while we were yet sinners, not when you got your life together, not when you started behaving right, not when you started attending church, in your deepest, darkest moment, while we were yet sinners, the Bible says Christ died for us. And every single person in this room right now is a recipient of this love. So whether you feel it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether you walked in here with 40 years of faith journey behind you, or whether you walked in here today not sure of what you think about any of this. Like, I don't know, man, I'm not a God person, I'm not a church person, I'm not a Jesus person. Before you knew any of that, I want you to know that God loved you, and he loves you today. And whatever distance exists between you and where you hoped you would be, whatever distance exists between you and what you hoped God would be for you, whatever distance exists between you and the place you hope to be, God's covered that distance. Whatever far country you've been living in, whether it's emotionally, whether it's spiritually, whether it's relationally, whatever that is, whatever you came carrying into this room this morning, God knows. And God loves you. And God, 2,000 years ago, he died for you. So look back love was already moving towards you before you ever knew you needed it. Now, let's look at Luke 15, and there's this interesting thing that's going to take place. So in Luke 15, 1 and 2, it's not going to be on the screen, but I do want to read this to you. It says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him," Jesus. "And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, 'This man receives sinners and eats with them.'" So this is the setting, this is the scene, this is where this whole thing's about to take place. And so what you see is Jesus is eating with lost people and hanging out with lost people, and the religious people go, "We don't like that." And so in response to all of this, Jesus is going to teach a series of 3 parables, one about a lost sheep, one about a lost coin, and the one we're going to look at today is about a lost son, or what you may have heard of it called before, the prodigal son. So look in verse 11, and we'll start there. And so this is the teaching of the prodigal son and the lost son in response to the Pharisees who were grumbling about him eating with lost people. It says, "There was a man who had 2 sons. How many sons? All right, at Osceola Baptist Church, the louder you are, the faster we get done. Okay? All right? So he had how many sons? 2. That's some people that want to eat. Okay. It says that he had 2 sons. And verse 12 says, "And the younger of the 2 sons said to the father, 'Father, give me the share of property that's coming to me.' And he divided his property between them." Now, in the ancient Near East, this is something that you didn't say to your father. I mean, like, we get it, right? Who gets an inheritance? The person who gets an inheritance is somebody that is living, and the person, their father or their mother, somebody had to die for you to get an inheritance, right? And so what this young man does is this, he goes up to his dad and he says, "Hey, Dad," he says, "here's what I want my inheritance," which is essentially to say, "Dad, I wish you were dead." And can you imagine somebody saying that to a father? In other words, what he's saying is, "Hey, Dad, you're worth more to me as a corpse than you are as a father." I mean, that's tough. That's tough. And so in that moment, He's saying, I want your assets without your relationship. And that's the opening line of this story, and Jesus doesn't soften it for us. I mean, he hits it straight on. He just lets it land because Jesus is talking to two audiences right here. Now, he's telling a story about two sons, but the two sons represent these two audiences. One audience is lost people that Jesus is eating with. He's talking about the people who are lost. And the other audience is the people he's kind of talking to, and it's the religious people, those Pharisees that were condemning Jesus for actually eating with lost people. And Jesus looks at all of them, every single one of them, and he tells a story about a God who lets his son walk away. Now let that sit for just a second. That there's a God who loves us enough that he let us walk away. And the father in the story doesn't chase him down. He doesn't argue with him. He doesn't try to prove a point. He doesn't do these things. He doesn't threaten him. You know what he does? He divides the property and then he lets him go. That's what the father does. Because love, real love, and we know this by experience, real love isn't coerced. Real love, it does not control. You know what real love does? It opens its hands even when it breaks the heart. That's what real love does. And this is what God is doing. This is what Jesus is teaching in this moment. And so the son, what does he do? Well, he takes everything and he leaves. So now we're going to get to this far country thing, this far country, what I call the far country failure. And we've probably been there, many of us. But let's look and see what Jesus teaches in 13 and 14. It says, not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and he took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. You know, it's interesting about far countries. You've heard people in your life, they get into these bad groups, or they get into these bad habits, and here's what they say. Everybody says, oh, it won't get me. Like, I can control it. It's all good, because it's a far country. It's far away from me. Addiction, that's far away from me. Pain, it's far away from me. Relationship issue, that's far away from me. I'm not that close to it. But here's the reality for us all. The far country is never as far as it seems when you're headed towards it. And the sad reality is it's never far enough away when you're trying to get out of it. We've seen people end up in these spaces. If you've been around here very long, you've heard me say this, that direction, not intention, determines destination. People come to my office and go, I don't know how I got here. I don't know how all this happened. I can tell you how. You were traveling in that direction. You just finally arrived there. In spite of the people that loved you, trying to dissuade you from going down that path, in spite of the people who loved you and trying to talk you out of doing that thing or whatever that thing was, you just finally arrived at there. And then here's the tougher part, is that when people end up in those spaces and places, it's really hard to get out of. I mean, if you've ever known somebody that's had an addiction, you know they will tell you how difficult it is. I remember I used to work years ago before I went into ministry. I used to work in a prison. And I remember there was this one inmate. His name was Pelon. That's what we called him. I don't know what his real name was. But Pelon worked with us when we would go into this particular institution. And he was in prison for breaking and entering an armed burglary. And he was doing it to support a drug habit. And so I asked Pelon, he'd been in 10 years. I said, hey, man, so just a question, because I've never done drugs before. Don't know. Other than caffeine. Like caffeine, I'm an addict, okay? But I've never done drugs before. And I said, and he was in because he had I said, what was your drug of choice? He said, man, I got addicted to crack. That's what I got addicted to. And I said, well, you've been in 10 years. Let me ask you a question. I mean, if you walked out of here today, are you over that? He said, man, I can still taste it. And that's what it does. When you're in the far country, when you're trying to leave, man, that far country is not as far in the rear view as it seems. It's kind of like that little disclaimer on your side mirror. Objects in rear view are closer than they appear. And we feel the weight of that. And so the son, he burns through everything, the money, the relationships. He burns through all this stuff, the dignity. And then, man, if that wasn't bad enough, I mean, he's now broke. He's shamed. All of the friends, you know how it is. Like, you got some money. Friends want to hang around because it's party time, because they got the money. They can finance the whole operation. When the money's gone, the friends leave. And now he's all alone. And then the famine hits. If it wasn't bad enough that you were broke and friendless and all alone, it's like now the famine hits. which in the ancient world meant that there was no safety net. Like in first century Israel, there wasn't like a welfare program where if you didn't have any money, you could just go to the government and the government would help you out. If you had no money and you were broke and you had no people, you had no family that you belonged to. And remember now, he told his family, you're dead to me. You had nothing. And this is where he finds himself. And he is as far from home as a person can get. He is not just broke, he's ritually defiled. He's ritually defiled. He's ethnically displaced and he is relationally alone. That's where he finds himself. No one gave him anything. And so the world that he chose over his father has now abandoned him. And I just want to tell you this as lovingly as I can. If you choose the world over God, the world will overpromise and underdeliver. If you think that this world can satisfy that longing that you have in your heart and you go after it, it'll be fun for a little while, but I'm just telling you, nothing in this world will finally and fully satisfy the appetite that you had, because the appetite that you have deep within your soul that you can't quite figure out what that is, that's the longing that God pre-wired in you for him. And he is the only thing that will satisfy. And it's precisely at this moment, in the pig pen, starving, alone, friendless, ceremonially unclean, that the most important sentence in this story appears. And so if you would, let's look at, there's this moment, it says in 15 and 17 that we're going to look at. So he went, it says, and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. All right, so I need your help reading this next part together, right here. Ready? The one that's colored for you. Now, nice and loud. Remember, it impacts how quick you get out. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish with hunger? It says that he came to himself. 3 words. And it feels like in this moment that this whole story, this would be the hinge in this. Not that he came to God. Not that he came to religion. It says that he came to himself. He woke up. And when he kind of came to his senses, he wakes up and he thinks, this is not who I am. This is not who I'm supposed to be. This doesn't even feel right in the moment. I have a father and I have a home. And I've been living like I have neither. Anybody relate? Man, we got a heavenly father. We got a heavenly home. And man, if we're not careful, we live like we have neither. And what in this moment, he begins to think. He's like, okay, I've got my inheritance, so I've kind of cut my dad off from my life. So I'm not going to go back. He's kind of got this thing going on. I'm not going to go back as a son because I don't think he's going to take me. And I don't even really want to, and as a matter of fact, he's going to prepare a speech in a minute because he's going to try to say something before the father says something or before anybody else says something, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. But when he shows, like when he's get this whole thing together because he's like, I'm not going back as a son, I'm just going to go get a job, because if I can go get a job at my dad's house, I know how well the servants eat there, and so I can live as a servant. And that's his plan. So, this is where look back love enters the frame. Okay? This is where all this is going to happen. Look in verses 18 through 20. It says, this is him, okay? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father. So here's his speech, and I want you to pay attention to where the speech starts, and I want you to pay attention to where it ends, okay? I want you to think about all of it. He says, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. Now, again, he's not saying this to his father. This is the rehearsal that he's going through. I don't know if you've ever gotten in trouble or knew you were going to get in trouble when you get home. Anybody? Like you got in trouble at school and you knew like, oh my goodness, when I get home, it's over, right? Like or if you got pulled over or something and you got a ticket and it's like, all right, I know they're calling mom and dad because they know my mom and dad, when I get home, it's going to be trouble. We've all been there before. So you've rehearsed the speech. You've got it all figured out. This is what he's doing. And he says, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion. And he ran and he embraced him and he kissed him. It says that while he was a long way off. That phrase tells us something that we need to know, and everything really that we need to know about the Father. See, he saw him while he was a long way off. What does that tell us? Which means that the Father was looking for his Son. Which means that he had been looking every morning. Man, eyes on the road. I'm looking over the horizon. I'm looking for the silhouette of my Son to come home. His gaze, that look-back love, was longingly waiting for the moment that his Son would come over the horizon and be heading in his direction. And he was scanning the horizon again, not because he's angry, not because he was rehearsing a lecture like, I cannot wait till that boy gets home. Y'all ever been there before, parents? Like, your kid's rehearsing the lecture, or they're rehearsing the excuse. You're rehearsing the lecture. Like, you wait, man, I got it. I got a good one dialed up. Not because he was rehearsing his lecture, but because love doesn't stop watching. Love waits. And here's a detail that we will miss as Western readers. In the ancient Near East, if a son had squandered his inheritance among the Gentiles, which is exactly what the prodigal son does, and return home, the community would perform this ceremony called a kezazah. They would break a pot in front of him. Imagine this is how this is supposed to work. The son comes back. He squandered all the money. He's done all the stuff. He's lived the party life. And as he comes back, what the community would do is they would all gather together. And as he approaches, they would break a pot, symbolizing the fact that you're broken off from us. You're not welcome here. You're not worthy to be here. That was the ceremony that they would do. You were cut off from your people. And it was public, and it was very, very humiliating. And it was final. And you know who knew this? The Father. He knew that if his son walked into that village, that everybody knew what the son had done. It's kind of like living in Osceola. You know, you can't do anything in Osceola and somebody not know. And they knew that if that son, the father knew that if that son walked back into the village, that the community would cut him off before he got there, and they would perform the ceremony with the pot and break him off and say, hey, you are not welcome here. So you know what the father does? The father runs. He sees him off in the distance, and this is another thing in Jewish culture, like men didn't run like men of nobility. You didn't run. And not only did you not run, but men of nobility also, it was considered a disgrace to hike up and show your ankles. Boy, if they could see us now. You know, in the 1920s, they called croquet the devil's game. Or they called it that because women would have to pull up their skirts a little bit and show their ankles to hit the ball. I'm like, that's crazy, right? Imagine what they would say now. The father runs, robed, hiked up, sprinting down a dirt road, and you have to understand that this was scandalous in this day. Again, men of honor composed themselves. Men of dignity walked slowly and let people come to them. Men of dignity did not run to anybody. But yet, here's what we see. We see the father running towards the son. Not because the son had finally gotten his act together, not because the apology was compelling, but because the look-back love had already been set in motion before the son ever went broke and needed to come home. The father had already determined, my love is eternal for you. My love is always going to be there for you. I don't care what you do. The day you come home, the father's love is there. And that's look-back love. It doesn't react to your turning. It was already moving. That's what it was doing. It was already headed in your direction. Your turning just means that you're finally facing the direction that the love was coming from. The day you and I turn to Jesus and say, Jesus, I need you to save me. In that day, the decision, God's love didn't suddenly say, hey, now I'll show up. His love was always toward us. We just finally made the turn in that direction. And so the father reaches his son before the community does. And then he throws his arms around him. And the Greek word suggests that he literally falls on his neck. You can see and feel the weight and the emotion behind that. And he embraces him hard and he kisses him. And before the son can finish, and this is the beautiful part, remember I told you, compare the two speeches. Because remember, he has one rehearsed. Now he's about to deliver the speech. And here it comes. Listen to it. Verses 21 through 24. And the son said to him, so the father has ran to him. Now it's time to get the speech out, and I got to say it before the father gets there because I don't want him to say, hey man, no, I'm breaking pots, you got to go. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father cuts him off mid-sentence. Says, man, I don't need your excuses. I love you. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this was my son, my son was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost, and he is found. And they began to celebrate. I love, man, that the father interrupts the speech. Because that's how we feel like sometimes I got to get to God before he gets to me. I got to come to God and I got to explain all of my life to God. And God's like, man, I knew it before you did it. I knew it before you said it. I knew it. And I loved you anyway while you were a sinner. I sent Christ to die for you. The robe is his honor. The ring is his authority. And then it says he put shoes on him. Now, why is that important? Because in Jesus' day, servants were barefoot. And remember, the son's trying to come back as a hired servant, and the father's like, no, you're not coming back as a servant. You're coming back as my son. I'm putting shoes on your feet. And he does that. And then the fattened calf, this is the beautiful part, man, I love this. The fattened calf means the father had been planning the party for a long time. We got some cow people in here, some people who know way more about it than I do. The only thing I know about cows is they're in the meat section and dairy section at the store. That's about all I know. But here's what I do know, because biology tells me you don't fatten a calf overnight. The father had been planning the return of his son, and he had been feeding that calf because there's a day that's coming back and we're going to have a party. And I just need to make sure that this calf is ready to go. And that's what look back love does. It loves, and it's preparing, and it's waiting for me and you to finally turn and see the light of love of Jesus Christ that began shining towards you thousands of years ago. And who knows, maybe today will be the day that you get to turn and for the first time in your life see that. We'll talk about that in a second. This isn't where the story ends. Because remember now, how many brothers were there? There were 2 brothers. So here's what the story continues to tell us. It says, verse 25, now his older brother was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. That's how you know they weren't Baptists. They weren't dancing, right? Kidding. And he called one of the servants and he asked what these things meant. And he said to them, your brother has come and your father has killed the fattened calf because he was received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. And his father came out and entreated him. See, Jesus doesn't say that the story ended with the party. That's where we would have loved to have ended it at, but that's not where it ends. He keeps going because there is another son. And he's been in the field working all day. He's been doing what he's supposed to do. He's been doing everything right. He's been following every rule. He's been doing the things that he knows to do. He's never crossed the line a single time in his life. And he comes home and there's music and there's dancing and his brother's there. The one who wasted everything, and he's being celebrated. He's furious. He refuses. I'm not going in there. Like, what are y'all doing? And the father comes out to him, the same father, with the same posture. And he pleads to him. And here's what I want you to see. The older brother's tragedy in this whole story is not that he had worked hard. I think working hard is a good thing. I think when you work hard, it's amazing how people who work hard, good things tend to come to them. Figure that out. And it's not that he was faithful. I think we ought to be faithful in everything that we do. His tragedy was that he was surrounded by this same look-back love his entire life. And he turned it into a transaction. He kept score. He built a ledger. He turned the relationship into a performance review. And see, here's the danger in all this. The father says something here that breaks open the whole story. Listen to what he says, verses 29 through 31. But he answered his father, look, these many years that I've served you, I've never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him? And he said to him, son, you were always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Man, you're always with me. Everything I have was always yours. Everything and always. Two really powerful words in this text. And the older brother, here's what he's trying to teach him. He says, you had access to everything all the time. You've been here. He just never threw the party. He never received what had always been available to him. He had always just been so busy. And again, I told you that there's this parallel that he's drawing in this story. Remember, there's two sons, and the two sons represented the two groups of people. You had the lost, the tax collectors and sinners, and then you had the religious people. And Jesus is being very intentional about casting it this way. And here's what I want to ask you today as we think about these two parties. Because again, if we're not careful, I mean, our mission is to reach lost people, to share the gospel. But if we're not careful, what happens is we come into the church, we become inward focused, and then you know what we do? We turn the look back love into a transaction. That we're going to check boxes, we're going to do the thing. And here's what happens with church people. This is what we do. We get into the church. Now, when we came into the church, people welcomed us in, they loved us. We remember the day that we received salvation by grace through faith. We remember the day that we were baptized and everything felt great, man. You felt like you were walking on air. And then after a while, we get into this thing. It's like, okay, so what do I do now? What does a good Christian do? Oh, a good Christian goes to church. Okay, check, I'll do that. You're part of a connect group, maybe. We hope that if you're new to our church, you get involved in a connect group. This is what you probably traditionally heard called Sunday school. You give, you tithe, you do those things. And here's what happens. You pray, you read your Bible. You get around people long enough, and what begins to happen is it becomes very transactional. The love for Jesus no longer feels like love. It feels like work. And then those of us who get really good at it, if we're not careful, what we begin to do is, we begin to look down at other people and go, you're not as good at these things as I am. And you don't deserve God's love, just like the older son did. You don't deserve the Father's love. Those people don't deserve. I've been here longer. I've been at this church longer than anybody. I've been here longer. They don't deserve the kind of love and the kind of recognition and the kind of privilege that I deserve. And this is what Jesus is pushing in on. So here's a question. Which son are you today? Are you the one in the far country trying to find your way back? If you are, today is the day, man. The light of love, look back love, has been shining in your direction for a couple thousand years, and today is your day maybe to turn around and see it and accept the love of Jesus Christ, that you might get saved today. That's my prayer for you. Or are you the one at the door, faithful, present, going through all the motions, but somewhere along the way, you have stopped receiving love and you have started maintaining and performing? Because look back love, the good news is it's available to both groups of people today. Now here's where I have to tell you something about this parable that changes everything. Jesus isn't just telling the story about a father and two sons. Jesus is telling the story. It's about God. The Pharisees had accused him of eating with tax collectors and sinners and people who he shouldn't be hanging out with. And Jesus responded with 3 stories in a row: the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. And all 3 asked the same question. Here's the question that all 3 of these parables are asking. What does God do with something, or when something he loves has gone missing? What does he do when something he loves has gone missing? He searches, he scans, and he runs. That's what he does. The shepherd, what did he do? Left the 99, went after the one. What did the woman do? The woman tears apart her entire house looking for the lost coin. And the father, he sprints down a long dirt road to get to his son. It's not a God who waits for you to earn your way back. This is not a God who keeps the ledger. This is not a God who's been watching the horizon since the moment you walked away. He is ready to run in your direction. He is just waiting for me and you, or maybe you, to turn this morning and see the light of the look back love. And here's what this is where Easter adds to the story. Easter tells us that God, this running, robe-wearing, ring-placing, feast-preparing Father, loved us so much that he sent his own son into the faraway country. Jesus didn't stay on the porch. Jesus, he came all the way to where we were. He went to the pig pen. That's where Jesus went. He took on our ceremonially unclean position. Our sin, our shame, our exile, and you know what he did? He took all that on and he carried it to the cross. That's what he did for us. The cross is the Father's robe that he's placing on us. It's his righteousness. The empty tomb is the look-back love that's arriving on you and I here today at its destination. Launched before the foundation of the world, launched before you and I were ever born, set in motion before you even realized or knew who God was and what he had done for you. He crossed the distance through a manger, through a ministry, through a crucifixion, through the silence of 3 days, arriving to you on Easter. And the signal was sent way before you ever knew that you needed it. And so today, it finds you. The question is what are you going to do with it? Are you going to respond? I want to close this. When astronomers talk about look-back time, when they describe the light of a distant star arriving after several thousand years of travel, they never say, oh, you know what? The star found the observer. That's not what they say. It's like somebody discovered the star. Not because it wasn't there, but because somebody finally saw it for the first time and they documented it. And I'm telling you this morning, the love of God finds you. It's not passive. He's been pursuing you for a long time. It's not just light scattered in all direction, hoping somebody just happens to look at it. It was like a laser beam of hope pointed right at you from eternity past. And that is what God has done. It's pursuing. It is personal. It's a father who hiked up his robe and he sprinted towards you. And today he's sprinting. And I hope you know that his love is coming after you. Here's the only question that matters this Easter morning. Will you let yourself be found? That's the question. Will you let yourself be found? Not, are you good enough? Because you know what? Newsflash, you're not. Neither am I. That's not the question. It's not, have you been away too long? Because you haven't. The feast has been ready. Do you have the right words? You don't need them. The son didn't even finish the speech before the robe was put on him. Because look-back love has already done the hard part. It's already closed the distance. It's already taken care of mine and your sin debt. It's already absorbed the shame. And you know what else look-back love did? It emptied the tomb. By the power of the Holy Spirit, God raised him from the dead to prove to me and you that his love is real. And his love is finished. And it's running toward you right now. And so you don't have to generate it. You don't have to earn it. All you have to do is receive it. So I'm going to ask the worship team to come up here, and they're going to lead us in a closeout song. And so now is the opportunity. If you don't know Jesus, if you've never made a profession of faith, and today you're hearing for the first time that there's a God who loves you, that will accept you right where you are, that you don't have to go perform some stuff, clean some stuff up before you come to him, that you can come today and be known by the God of the universe, that his love has always been aimed at you all the time. That you could turn today and you could accept it.